We explained in the previous sections of the seminar basically how the light comes down from the angels, which are called the Chayot HaKodesh, the holy animals, through the angels, which are called the Ophanim, down through the astrological cycle, which is the upper cycle or unitary sound of the world, into the 70 Sarim, the 70 rulers or genies of the world, and through them the influence becomes divided all the way down to where all the different creatures of the physical world, all the animals, and all the 70 nations of the people with all the different kinds of animals, and all the different kinds of plants, and all the different kinds of still life, with the various metals, and the various salts, and the various gases, and solids, and liquids, and how all of these things come out through the coming down of the light through various lessenings into this world. Now, it's to be understood that when we're talking about the lessening of how an upper world is enclosed within a lower world, it's to be understood that it's not just a lessening of the light where the light goes away and the lower world now exists by itself, but rather than that the upper world becomes an inner thing to the lower world and is enclosed within it. And the way that the light comes into the world, means into the actual physical world, to finally enliven the various animals and the various creatures of this world, is to be understood like according to the three levels of the soul, of how the animal soul of a person is enclosed in a person. That the various three levels of this animal soul are basically on the levels, on the three levels of the brain, the heart, and the liver, which those are the general kalim, the general vessels, which are the vessels for these levels of the physical soul which comes into the body. And this is to be understood, first of all, on the lowest level, which is on the liver. There is the actual impression of the life into the body, and this is called the kista de chayuta, the impression of life. And when we sleep, the more inner levels of the soul are no longer there, and what keeps the body alive when we're asleep is this kista de chayuta, this impression of life, which is the level of soul which is in the liver. And from this level of life, which is what keeps the body alive when we're asleep, come the dreams. Now, the reason for that is because in this part of the soul, which is in the liver, are the powers of imagination. So let's explain now the three levels and what powers they have. That in general, right now we're explaining the levels of the soul of Klippa, the levels of the actual physical soul from the outer shells, and not of the actual holiness. So this level, which is on the liver level, is what's called the Yetzer Hara, the inclination for evil. Now this inclination, as are all these levels of the shells, are not necessarily evil. They can be good or evil. But the basic power of this inclination is the power of imagination, which the way it traps a person to do what it wants is it shows him a picture in his mind of how beautiful this thing will look if he'll go after it. So that whether it's wonderful food or a beautiful shape that it's showing him, so it shows him this shape, and it tells him if you do this thing, and it paints a whole imagination in his head of what he'll do, like if he'll rob a bank and he'll have a bunch of money and then he'll be able to go to Hawaii and live like a king. And through this, it gets him to think about doing this evil thing. Now, however, we understand that really this power of imagination is not really necessarily an evil power, because this can be what gives ambition to somebody to start a business, for instance. That what he thinks, in the same way that what gave this guy the evil inclination to rob the bank, in the same way, we understand that in many times it's the power of imagination that this person thinks that if he'll have this money and he'll be able to live this wonderful life. So this gives him the power to start a business and gives him the ambition to work real hard and try to pick up the money. So this comes from the same section of the soul. The next section up of the animal soul is what's found in the heart, and this is basically the emotions, and it's really the actual emotional intellect, which is really the power of rationalization. In other words, the power of the soul to rationalize. And now again, we're talking in Klippa, and the shells, which are the shells of evil. So this is the power of the soul, to the inner mind, in other words, of the person, which is found in the heart, to rationalize his actions, so that, like he says to himself, business is business, or the other guy deserved it, or he made me mad and that's why I did it, and stuff like that. And through these rationalizations, he tells himself that his actions were really proper, and does not look at them to see if maybe he really should change them. And then the next level up is the actual intellectual power of the person in the brain, and this is where the intellectual soul resides. And this is the soul that looks towards good. In other words, looks towards what is the good way for me to be, and asks certain questions. How should I be, and what should society be like, and stuff like that. And so that this is sort of like the soul that says, Confucius says, that society should be good and that we should really look at ways of how to improve things and things like that. So that it's not trying to rationalize one's bad actions, but is really trying to look on how to be good. And yet, this is also considered one of the souls of the Klippa, of the evil shells, because we understand that really the intellectual soul, if it only looks on the way to be good without looking upstairs of really how to be united with God, or subjugated to God, or somehow in line or in tune with God. So we understand that this intellectual soul can really come up with worse things than its lower two counterparts, because it can figure out a good that it has to do only with himself. And the basic thing in most people, though, however, is that this intellectual soul, even though it really does tell the person to do good, but that the good comes out in a cold intellectual fashion, and is not really from the soul, but really just a mental way of looking at things, and the only reason that he actually does the good is because it's intellectually logical to him, and it looks like the right thing to him to do. Now, these three levels of the soul represent basically the three levels, as we said, that the level of the liver, which represents the level of dreams, also represents the level of the demons, which have a body like that, but they don't have a physical body. So that on that level, there's an inner body which encloses within the outer body of the person. So that, in other words, that there's the dream body, which is the body that's in the blood and the liver, which is where we feel the actual external coming into being of the emotions. It means not the actual emotion, but the actual action of the emotion. So that, for instance, the emotion of anger, there's the inner emotion of anger, and then there's the emotion that you want to hit. And this is the outer gut emotion, and this is what is felt in this body. then within it is included a more inner body of the emotions of the heart. Within that is included a more inner body of the intellectual soul. So that also in the other creatures of these worlds, which each one of these levels is a whole world with an infinite amount of possibilities for creatures. Not only that, as the worlds go up, they become more and more infinite. So that, for instance, it's understood that on the demonic level, every person in this world exists on that level because he has that soul, his dream soul, in other words. And then on the next level up of the heart soul, also every person in this world exists there and has a body there. Which means, of course, we understand that that body on that level is not like the body in this level. So that, for instance, the body that's enclothed in the cat on the DNA level, we understand that the DNA level has a whole cat in it. But the DNA level, the shape of the cat is different, and not only that, the DNA is in each actual cell of the cat. There's a whole cat in there, so that anybody who saw Jurassic Park knows that if you would get one cell of that cat, if you had the right technology, you can make a whole cat out of it, which might not include the memories of the cat, which those are in the brain of the cat, not on the cellular level of the cat, but you would still get a cat with the same color and the same size, etc., as the original cat out of one cell of the cat. Now, to explain the subject matter of the enclothing of the personalities and the enclothings of the various bodies of the different worlds, for that we have to explain what is called in Kabbalah Hislapshus HaPartzufim, the enclothement of the faces. That, like before, we explained that the various animals in the world and all the various creatures of this physical world have their root in the upper Chayot HaKodesh, the holy animals, and over there's 4 faces, and from those 4 faces come out all the different types of animals. And it's to be understood that, in other words, what does it mean that within each outer face or character is included the inner face of the angel, and in the inner face of the angel are included all these outer characters together. And the explanation for this is, like, for instance, in an actor that is playing different roles, that it's a known thing that an actor will play in different movies, so that once he might play in a movie that's from the side of kindness, so in other words, he plays a character from the side of kindness, which is the right side, like the angels have a right side of their face, and he'll be a wonderful, wonderful person that we just fall in love with, which love is kindness. And then the next day he could play a movie from the left side, means from the side of sternness and fear, and he can be a horrible, horrible person that's running around killing people and terrorizing people, and he could be just totally terrible and scary. And then the next day he could play a movie where he's a very funny person and makes you laugh. And the next day he could play a movie where he's a character is a combination of the right and the left. So in other words, that he's not really just totally good, and he's not really totally evil. He has facets of both. And he's not totally strong, and he's not totally weak, but he has facets of both. And he's not totally funny, and he's not totally sad, but has facets of both. And this means a combined character from the midah, from the measurement or upper sephira of beauty, means what is called mercy. That mercy means it's a combination of both the right and the left, of kindness and judgment, into a character that because it has many facets is much more beautiful than just a totally good or a totally evil character. So that really we notice that most of the Oscars don't really go to the totally good or totally evil characters. So that, like, for instance, a movie like Heidi, where she's like a totally good little girl, it's a nice movie, but it probably won't win no Oscars. Then there could be a movie about Frankenstein, where it would also be, like, in other words, a totally bad kind of monster, but it won't necessarily win any kind of prizes. And usually the type of movies that do win the great prizes, like the Oscars and stuff like that, is about a character. It's a combination of many, many different facets working together to make up this character. And now it's understood that the outer character, though, of this different characters that ended up on the screen are coming all from the same actor. And so how is it that this one actor projected a bunch of different characters out of himself? So we understood that really all of these characters were included within himself. And even though we might see him on a talk show and say, well, really, he's not like any of these characters. He's not at all like any of these characters that came out of him. And yet, we see that when he talks about these characters, and when you interview him and say, how did you play in this movie, and you came up with this character that won you this great award, so you see that he understood this character in a way that he was able to put himself into that character. And besides the fact that he was included into this character, also the playwright was included. In other words, the character of the playwright is also enclothed in the outer character that finally comes out on the screen, because the playwright wrote the play which the actor is playing. And the director's character, which the director directed in a particular way, so that you'll see that if you'll get a different director and a different actor, and they'll do the same play, it'll come out maybe totally different. So you see that there's an enclosement of characters. And that the outer character really, without the inner character, is totally non-existent. In other words, without the playwright, there wouldn't be this outer character at all. Because if the playwright didn't have this outer character included in his inner character, it wouldn't come out of there. So we understand over here what is the enclosement of the different characters. Now, in this way, what is happening is like this, that the various levels, like for instance, the angels are enclosed in the different levels of angels, one within the other, until finally the holy animals are enclosed in the Ophanim, in the cycles. The Ophanim are enclosed in the upper cycle of the world, the astrological cycle, which is the singular sound, which includes this whole physical universe. And that divides into the 70 genies, or the 70 sarim as they're called, which means the 70 rulers of this world. And from these 70 rulers, it comes down through the 3 levels of the soul, meaning the different levels of the genie or demonic forces, which means they come down from the mental ones, the inner emotional ones, and the outer emotional ones. And that is finally enclosed in the outer physical person. So that the outer physical person is what is the conscious personality. And within that conscious personality are enclosed deeper and deeper levels of personality. Now, as far as what we're meaning by enclosed, that at times we call them vessels, and at times we call them enclothements. The difference between vessels and enclothements is like this, that vessels are actually part of the thing, and enclothements is like clothing that the person can take it off and wear a different set of clothing. So in the previous example of the enclothements of the characters of the actor into the character in the screen, it's understood that the actual character of the actor himself is not an enclosement. That's actually a vessel. That he can't just get rid of it. There's very, very deep levels that he might not even know himself why he wants certain things and why he thinks certain ways. But the characters on the screen are like costumes that, as we said, one day he's playing Heidi and one day he's playing Frankenstein. And then the next day he's Forrest Gump. And then after that he's Superman. So obviously it means that the external character can be put on and off. And this is seen even in a single person, that in his daily life there is his real internal character of how he really is. And then this internal character takes on enclothements of external character. So he has his job character, and then he has his parent character, and then he has his social character, and various other characters. And each one of these characters has a whole personality with brains and emotions and thought, speech, and action. So that the type of thought, speech, and action that he has as a parent, the type of thought, speech, and action that he has at a job, and the type of thought, speech, and action that he has in a social setting are different. And yet, it's understood that really it's the internal character of the person that's enclosed in each one of these external characters. Now, this is what explains, in general, all the way up, how the worlds are enclosed one inside of the other, and how an outer level would literally not exist without the inner level which is in it. So it's understood that none of these outer characters that are on the screen would exist without the playwright writing them. And the playwright is really his own character. And basically it's understood also that in the playwright, all of these characters were originally in a form of a Heyulie, which was explained before, that a Heyulie was like a flint, like the fire in the flint. That it's not that they were actually there and he didn't have to think about it, just all of a sudden popped out one day, but rather that when he decided to sit down and write a play and thought about it and thought about how to write the play, so then this character emerged out of the Heyulie of his own character. Now this brings us to the subject matter of the letters, which in the subject matter of the letters, in other words, like we explained before, that the cat was made from letters. It was programmed from letters, that the DNA of the cat is made out of letters. Now, the basic thing is that the human DNA is also made out of letters, so that there's human DNA that tells us you're a person. Now, within the outer body, which has its own DNA, which is physical DNA, we said there's an inner body residing, which is the body from the level of the liver. Within that is a body from the level of the heart. And within that is a body from the level of the mind, which is an understood thing, basically, that obviously your very external emotions, if you want to hit somebody, is because you feel angry. And you feel angry is because mentally you feel that this person wronged you in some way. So that there's an enclosement of the mind and the heart, an enclosement of the heart into the expressive emotions, and the expressive emotions are enclosed in the final physical action of thought, speech, and action. Now, as we explained earlier, the way that these enclothements work is that the outer letters of an upper level become the inner letters of the next level below it, which this is also parallel to what we explained before, that on all the worlds, the Malchus, the kingdom of the upper level, becomes the crown of the lower level, which this in Kabbalistic terminology, it says, Dvar Melech Shilton. The word of the king is the rule. So what does it mean? It means that the word of the king, which is the higher level, means the actual expression of the word of kingdom, means what the king wants you to do. That becomes the inner will of the next level down. And this is explained, for instance, that, in other words, that in the emotional level and in the intellectual level, so the end of the intellectual level, which is when the intellectual level expresses, he done me wrong, that this man did a bad thing to me, this becomes the inner will of the emotional level, which is to get angry. And the end of the expression, when finally the emotional level comes with the letters and says, I'm angry, this becomes the inner crown, means the inner will for the expressive emotions of saying, now I want to hit him. And when this reaches the end of the external emotive levels and says, I'm going to hit him, this becomes the crown or the will for the actual action of hitting him. And it keeps going like this, that there's always at the inside of a level, which is the will for it, there is the letters of the upper level from it. So that really inside of the mental level, there's also the original letters, which are the outer levels of the level above it. So now to understand this in the three levels of the liver, the heart, and the brain, what we understand over here is that the letters on the conscious level, which is the outer level of the physical body, means that our conscious external level, the inner levels of that come from the level of the liver, which means the level of dreams. The inner level of that comes from the outer level of the letters of the emotions, and again, the inner level of that comes from the outer levels of the level of the intellect, and it keeps going up like that into the level of the soul, that, like we said before, that the encodement of the actual physical form of the body comes from the external letters of the soul. Now, once we learn the secrets of the letters, this includes within it all kinds of different secrets. Like we said, the Kabbalah is really an all-inclusive science, and we really don't have to necessarily explain everything separately. So that once you learn the letters, you learn all the sciences, for instance, of incantation, and all the various things of what the letters are, of the names of the demons and the names of the angels, which are all in letters. And there's the external letters and internal letters. And then the various letters, for instance, of all kinds of incantations, all the way from religious incantations to literally evil incantations. And the subject of the letters will be in the next section.